My name is Ben. I'm the director of Northing. Yeah, and we're based in Bergen. Here's the city of Bergen. It's very beautiful. And currently, Northing consists of an art space called Northing Space, a publishing house called Kinakaal forlag, which means Chinese cabbage publisher in Norwegian. And we recently just opened a tiny bookshop called Elephanten. It's the English word elephant plus the Norwegian article in the end. Compared to my hometown, and also happened to be Xiaowen's hometown, Shanghai, Bergen is very small, with a population around 400,000. But it's just the right size for us. It's big enough for all kinds of interesting events to take place, so that one would not be bored, but such as the best art buffet in the Nordic country, an international literature festival, and the biggest art festival, Festspill, in the north. But it's also small enough, so we'll be able to follow everything that happens there and not feeling missed out. As rumor says, it's the most rainy city in the world. It rains almost 300 days in a year, you can imagine. But because of that, we start to appreciate the sun more. And recently, due to the climate change, actually the weather is getting better there. And especially this September, it was quite nice. So it's very hard to concentrate on our work. Okay, enough travel advertisement. This is Northing Space. This is the street in front of Northing Space. And as everything else in the city of Bergen, the size of the space is quite modest. But it's so far the only cultural organization in Norway that focused on East Asian art and culture. We see it as our mission because unlike Berlin or London, or even maybe Manchester, there isn't a big community in Norway. There aren't a lot of opportunities for local Norwegians to get in contact with the culture without traveling far. But our passion is actually books and publications, especially publications concerning art and design. That's why we run on the side an independent publishing house. And we also try to connect Norwegian and East Asian artists and designers through book-related projects to forge communication and collaboration in depth. Sometimes some publications projects also led to exhibitions or cultural events. Okay, here I prepared some examples with slideshow and some physical books. I had to trace back to the good old days before the pandemic, before we established the space and the publisher, to start from this tiny project. I say it's tiny because the size of each work is truly small. Like this. But if you take the size of the collaboration into consideration, it might easily be our biggest project so far. And we initiated this project together with our long-term partner in Shanghai, Banana Fish. And our main role in this project was the curators. Do you know what that's called? This is minizine, or douben in Chinese. This is already a very popular product in China by Banana Fish. We then invited Norwegian artists and illustrators to make minizines with us. For them, this project was quite low threshold. The size is very small and it doesn't ask for a great deal of time and energy. But at the same time, it provides the artists with sufficient space and freedom for creativity. We collect in total 100 mini-zines from 100 Norwegian artists. They're all single-colored, riso-printed. Just pass on. We received a lot of attention and the opportunity to showcase the mini-zines in the exhibition room of Graphil, which is the Norwegian Association of Graphic Designers and Illustrators in Oslo. But here comes the challenge. The mini-zines are very small, but the exhibition room is vast. It's way too big. What do? We figure out a system. Here it is. On the floor, in the middle of the room, were the 100 Norwegian mini-zines. And on the wall, back there, were the mini-zines that banana fish collected in China, including those made by children. It was a hit. And later, we extended the mini-zine project to all 5 Nordic countries. This is the one that I opened. Is the Norwegian mini-zine box. And this is the Finnish. Danish, Swedish, and Icelandic. All 5 books together. I have a collection of 5 books here, so afterwards you can all come and have a look. Each box contains 12 zines by 12 different artists based in that country. After that, we published the first book through Kinakaal Forlag, the Chinese cabbage publisher. The design was still quite simple, quite unsophisticated, but the concept of cultural exchange was already present. It's a comic book. It's here. That one can read from both sides. From the front side is the comic stories by Norwegian artist Fredrik Rushedal. And from the back side, which by the way was also the front side of a traditional Chinese book, I think also in Japan and in Taiwan, in Hong Kong, they're still using this kind of this direction of reading. There's the works of Chinese comic artist called Wang Shuo. In China, he's known as Men Xiansheng. And they meet in the middle with an editorial text in both languages, English and Chinese, sorry. They worked on 4 chapters. They worked on 4 chapter titles, which are the same. The titles are Animals Around Us, Storage, The Elderly, and Go for a Stroll. In that way, the readers can compare the cultures of the 2 countries while reading the comic stories. And the contrasts came out much stronger than we anticipated. Not just in the styles, which is quite conspicuous, but also in their ways of narrative and viewpoints. Fredrik always starts his stories from one person's perspective, be it the first person or the third person, and the narratives usually take place in a very short time, from a couple of hours to a few seconds, like the story of Storage. He literally just turned around in his own tiny storage and drew everything inside. On the other hand, Oftentimes, there isn't a main character in Wang Shuo's stories. They are mainly told from a more general point of view, and the stories always cross a long span of time, from a whole day to a whole life. For example, in the last story, Go for a Stroll, people are insignificant. They are just dots in the landscape. And time disappeared too. It's just a never-ending loop. We chose these two artists was because at that time they were both the only PhDs in comic art in their countries. It's sort of a high-end collaboration. Frederick traveled to China after the book was published and performed his signature comic theater in Beijing and Shanghai, sharing the stages with Norwegian and Chinese local musicians, with Chinese traditional instruments too. Comic theater is a kind of performatic comic art that integrates comic stories with reading and performing and improvisational music. Comic reading is considered a very personal experience, but comic theater turns it into a collective experience, which is quite indelible. The two artists met in China. The original plan was that Frederick, would return to Shanghai the next year and Wang Shuo to Bergen. They would draw comic stories from and about each other's countries to make the second volume of Elsewhere. Then the mission of cultural exchange through this project will be immaculately fulfilled. But the plan was hampered by the pandemic. Good news is we're going to reboot this project next year and hope I'll be holding the second volume of Elsewhere in my hand very soon. This is the book that won us the first Most Beautiful Books of the Year award in Norway, our first, which is this one. It's a poetry anthology with 7 poets from Shanghai and 7 from Bergen. Hence the title, Fjellhav Poesi, which means mountain sea poetry. Bergen is a city of mountains, and Shanghai, the city over the sea. That's because Shanghai, the name of the city, literally means over the sea. The book is bilingual in Norwegian and Chinese. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to distribute to other countries. The Norwegian consulate in Shanghai purchased many copies as their gift for their guests in China. 2 of the poets from Shanghai attended the Bergen International Literature Festival. This is Wang Ying. He's also the curator of this project of the Chinese poets part. They shared the stage with the 2 poets from Bergen, and they read poems from the book in the improvisational music of local musicians. By the way, this female musician on the right side is also from Shanghai but lives now in Bergen. She's called Nora Zheng. She plays this traditional instrument called guzheng, but she's using an electronic one. This is an artist book we designed and published for the Norwegian artist Anna Tveik Nissen. The English title is Intertwine, and the Norwegian title Tvilling Song means the song of twins. Anna made first a documentary film with the same title. sort of a companion book of that film. The film and the book tell the story of Ellie and Toriel, a couple of twins. Both have developmental disability. The book and the film recorded their relationship with the surrounding. The main content of the book are their dialogue that the artist noted down during the filming process. Sadly, while the filming was still undergoing, Toriel died of kidney failure. So in the second half of the book, the dialogue turned into Ellie's monologue. She wondered what death is and why she was left alone. And all the illustrations in the book were drawn by Ellie. She enjoys drawing with colored pencil on A4 paper. We wanted to keep the original size of the drawings, but we don't want to make a big book, so this is the solution. But the artist is a Norwegian and she can't read Chinese at all. But she copied the Chinese translation by hand in the book and used this meditative exercise to try to understand the barriers between the twins and the world. They knew that there are meanings in everything around them, but they couldn't grasp the meanings as precisely as we do. By the way, it's that I understand, I write it down. That I don't understand, I just draw it. We also chose a special paper for the book, because if we use a common type of paper to repeat folding in and out, this corner will easily crack. So we chose a type of cotton paper newly developed in China with long fibers. It appears to be very soft, but at the same time it's tear resistant. Actually, the quality of the paper coincided with the qualities of the twins. They seemed fragile and frail, but just by being themselves, they had to stay strong and stay together. Some final detail, which is this wash tag, which is the contained all the colorform information. In the film, the twins used many stuffed animals to communicate with each other and with everyone else. Each stuffed animal has such a wash tag. And by adding a wash tag to the book, it also turned this book into a media, a tool for the twins to communicate with the world. And the book did bring their story to China. You can also see the stuffed animals. On the coldest day in February 2022, we screened the film in Fosun Art Center in Shanghai. Here's the building. By the way, it's super cold to sit inside this building. I think they spent all the money on the fancy facade, so there's no insulation whatsoever. So you see, everybody's in their winter jacket and coat. This is the then general consulate in Shanghai, and she couldn't sit through the event and left after the screening. Meanwhile, the artist and the elder sister of the twins, this is the artist, this is the elder sister of the twins, They were sitting cozily in Bergen, in the Hordaland Art Center. And after the screening, the Chinese audience met these two on the screen and had an in-depth talk with the artist. And through the event, the audience also gains an in-depth understanding of the social support for people with disabilities in Norway and how art plays a positive role in raising public awareness of people with disabilities. This book was a collaboration with a British artist named Miriam Stoney under the Bergen Assembly 2022. Which is an art triennial in Bergen, during which the whole city was turned into a big art exhibition incorporating many sub-venues. We were one of the sub-venues and at the same time published a book for one of the triennial artists. The book is trilingual. It's a poetry novel. The text itself is very conceptual piece of writing. I had two functions in this project. I was both the Chinese translator and the book designer. By the way, the other books, usually it's my wife, Ile, also the other half of Northing, that designed the books together with a Chinese designer called Pan Yanrong. But I personally make the design of this one. This is the book covers, and the reader can track down their favorable languages by following the arrows. It's very difficult to take good pictures of the book. This one is to show you what not to do with the book. The photographer apparently didn't understand and the intention of the designer, so I can explain with the book itself. If you open it like from this side, it's the original English text. It's called Debt Verses. And since it's about debt, I made that all the longer lines go over to borrow from the next page. And the artist also made a lot of footnotes as to mark her own literary debt. And if you open it from this side, and first of all is the Chinese translation, and you read vertically the other way. And if you open it from the back side, then you get the Norwegian translation, which happened to be on the same page as the Chinese one. So these two languages also borrow lines from each other. When there's a longer line, they go over into each other. This is the artist. She's from Scunthorpe, not so far from here. But she's currently based in Vienna. During the opening week of Bergen Assembly, we had an event for the book, and Miriam read from the book. So on the stage, she was doing this forth and back, which really confused the audience. I thought I would read the Chinese translation on the stage, but apparently I misunderstood my tasks. So I talked about the design instead. This is how the exhibition looked like in our space. The exhibition is totally about the book, actually. Like Miriam Stoney turned our space into a bookstore, which was selling only one book. And this is the bookshelf in front of the windows, with all the books she quoted or paraphrased from in the dead verses. Miriam was there signing the books for the readers. In the back of the room, there's a bookshelf. This one. Exactly the same as the one in front of the window, but filled with our book. Very minimalistic and homogeneous appearance. Later in 2023, we managed to open a retrospective exhibition for Bergen Assembly in Shanghai in the exhibition room of Banana Fish. Almost the opposite challenge of the mini-zine exhibition, huge volume of contents within a small space this time. In the end, it became an archive exhibition. The posters of Bergen Assembly also appeared in many places in Shanghai. And the umbrella, the most important merchandise of the triennial, was also distributed to Shanghai. Here comes the most important book we published so far, because it wasn't a publication project in the first place. Originally, it was a curatorial project. It distilled from a collaboration project between Norwegian artists Tonje Birkeland and Ma Liang, artists from Shanghai. In 2019, we initiated this project on account of the stark contrast between the approaches of the two artists. They're supposed to meet and work together and exhibit together in both countries. Out of the blue came the COVID pandemic that thwarted everything. So in the end, we concluded this project with this book. Actually, when I was showing this book in art book fairs, it's almost like a performance, because we encouraged the readers to read two books simultaneously with two hands and on the top of a table. Because they haven't been able to meet yet, we divided the book in two. But we still try to connect these two artists with the superpower of editing and book design. Later, when you come to the table to read the book, you will find out that all the page numbers go from one book to the other, 7, 8, 9, 10, to help you to navigate through the book. The text is a conversation between the artists conducted online during the pandemic, and we edited into 5 chapters. And the photos juxtaposed also compose a visual dialogue. As I mentioned, the reason we chose these two artists was the stark contrast in their approaches. Tonje always uses her own images to restore the female explorers obliterated or ignored in the exploration history. According to her research, there existed several female explorers around 100 years ago, but their stories were never documented as thoroughly as their male counterparts. because exploration was such a male-dominated field. Therefore, Tonya wishes to rewrite the exploration history with her art practice. She traveled to remote places like Bhutan, to Greenland, and Mongolia, and took pictures of herself in the landscape as the stage. On the other hand, Ma Liang comes from a theatrical family and he enjoys the most building the stage, and he's always behind the camera. He used to drive around in China with a truck full of stage props and invite local residents to join in his mobile photo studio. He took thousands of such pictures, this site. In a way, he visualized others' dreams and fantasy. The contrast between them was really intriguing, and we were eager to see what could happen if they started to work together. But it didn't happen. As I said, they still haven't met each other. All the pictures used in this book are selected by us from their archives. The first chapter is about photography in general. The second is about their identities. Tonya as a female artist creating fictional female explorers, and Ma Liang as a Chinese artist deploying international or Western visual languages. The third chapter is about a prop that both used extensively, which is suitcases. By Ma Liang's own words, he considered his suitcases more fairy tale-like and poetic, while Tonya's more historical and philosophical. The topics got more and more intimate and private. They started to talk about parenting and how they already started to involve their kids in their art practice. But the contrast lingers on. Here comes my personal favorite, the big eagle and the big world, as two gifts that we obtained since we were born. The last chapter is about the future, or more specific is the future after the pandemic. So, as the editor and the designers, we also embedded our hope in the picture selection. We chose pictures of Ma Liang using string by Norwegian artist Monk as inspiration, and Tonya in her East-Asian nomad costume. This series was taken in Bhutan. We hope that the cultures from the two countries could understand each other better and create a better future together. About the future, we need to be optimistic and look up, but from time to time we also have to look down to mind our feet or tie our shoelaces and stuff. Most of the time we're sitting in the past and in the future at the same time. At the end of the book, the two artists wrote a letter by hand to each other. Some small details. In the end, it's actually the readers that bind the two artists together. The book is finished, but we haven't given up on the project. And we hope one day we can reboot this project too, to bring these two artists together. This is our newest publications. And it's also the first time we worked with Japanese artists. It's 3 picture books by Japanese couple, Chie and Lei Ito. The original works are collages made from paper that the artists made and dyed by themselves. 3 stories about family and friendship, all very heartwarming. The first story is about a butterfly who wanted to know what that thing is high up in the sky. It flew higher and higher to find out. His friend asked, "What happened then?" It answered, "I got tired and flew back." The friend said, "Welcome back." That's the end of the story. The result is not important, but the process is. We should all support our friends who set out for adventure with this kind of spirit. The second story carries the same idea. This time, it is a little horse who loves running in the nature, and it doesn't care where it's heading to, or even if it gets lost, until it bumped into its mom. In the end of the story, the little horse is still running, but this time together with its family. And the third story gave the title to the whole series, Quiet Friends. A caterpillar and a snail are good friends and they hang out together quietly. The text in this one is very beautiful, almost like haiku, as well as the pictures. Simple but not boring. And the joy comes from looking for the quiet friends on each page. This. Three books come in one furoshiki wrapping. It's kind of cultural communication in itself. And the artist also made an instruction of how you can wrap the books back. Last year, the 2 Japanese artists came to Bergen and they exhibited the original works in our space. And went on the stage of the International Literature Festival. For the first time, they used English to tell the cultural background of the books and their own interpretation of Japanese culture to a big Norwegian audience. I was very impressed by their diligence. Later, they visited many art institutions in Bergen and hosted a paper making workshop and a sushi making workshop. This is our most recent book-related exhibition. It's in April. It's a traveling exhibition started in China and traveled through Southeast Asia during the pandemic and later through many European cities, including Paris, Milan, Berlin, Rotterdam, Vienna, and Bergen was its last stop. The exhibition is called Book Nomad. In order to do something different from the previous stops, we invited the local artists, Danish artists living in Bergen, in fact, to create the setting up of the bookshelves. She is 63-year-old, but she just graduated from the art school in Bergen last year. So it's very inspiring to have her on board. It's never too old to start your creative career. And she didn't let us down at all. Meta always uses and reuses found objects to construct unexpected sculptures and installations. This time she reused many of our old exhibition materials packed away in our storage, together with treasures from her own collection. It's a kind of co-curated exhibition. On the way to Bergen, every previous host got to add their own books to the collection. Book that in a way redefined the concept of Asianness in a non-geographical context. So in the end, there were more than 60 books exhibited in Northing. Meta understood her task and the reason we chose her very well. She incorporated in the installation many objects that bore the trace of daily life in Bergen and Norway, instead of trying to add stereotypical symbols from East Asia. So yet again, we tried to bridge the two cultures with books. Together with that exhibition, we finally opened our own bookshop within the gallery with the name Elephanten. The name was simplified from the name of the very first event that took place at Northing Space in the end of 2019. At that time, it was a pop-up bookshop called Elephant in a Store. This is how it looked at that time. You see, the exhibition room was much narrower than it is now. And during the night, the shadow of an elephant left on the wall. It's actually casted from this origami elephant. And this is how the bookshop looks like now. It's too small to have nice pictures. Again, the trend of creating photo-friendly attractions in the city. Yeah, against the trend of creating photo-friendly attractions in the city. It's less than 8 square meters, and as I estimate, just big enough to house one Asian elephant. It's too small for an elephant from Africa. Yeah, that's our story of trying to bridge into cultures through books. Thank you. Now, I have all the books that I mentioned on the table, so please feel free to come and read and touch and
Thank you. We got
experience.
some time for some questions. The room is fuller now. If it's okay, I would start with a couple questions, and hopefully the audience will also start engaging with their questions. So how do you, I guess the first question has to do just with, how do you divide and conquer your energies, among all those different types of projects like curation, managing an art space, funding applications, designing books, touring exhibitions as well, and also, I guess, other types of partnerships building. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, to put it in a nice way, we are very organic, but you can also call it messy. So we didn't plan very thoroughly. We have an exhibition program for the space, but out of that we took, actually, like many working in the culture field does, do. We say yes to almost everything. And yeah, it's a good question, I think, because when thinking about Norway, I think everybody would think that it's a very quiet and slow-tempoed country. But actually, maybe because of the environment, cultural environment there, and with the nature, with the beauty of the urban space, we managed to calm us down to really work on stuff and make things happen like this.
And because it rains so much.
It rains so much,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So you prefer staying in and work.
What can we do?
And then I guess also a little bit context and for our audience about yourself. You originally studied architecture and you had an architecture practice and probably still do. But at the same time, you're also a literary translator. Then you are fluent in multiple languages like Mandarin, Chinese, Japanese, Italian, English, Norwegian, right? How does that kind of, I guess, embody or support your practice as a curator and publisher as well?
Interestingly, I always thought that architectural education is a very comprehensive education, that it should be implied not just in the higher level of education, but more to the how do you call it, primary education. So I think when an architect decided not to do architecture, he could actually do many things. So I happen to be interested in literature too. Myself, I translated Norwegian novels and Scandinavian novels back to Chinese. So all these different practices help me to broaden the understanding of cultural differences and cultural communication. That also, it's again, it's not very well planned. It just happened, and now I just try to use all my knowledge from my education, from my practice, different practices into my daily jobs.
Yeah, thank you. It seems like throughout your practice and also, the collaboration with your partner, one thing really strikes me is kind of this very borderless, approach, without border, like borderless in terms of disciplinary, borderless in terms of, languages, geography, and also, in terms of pairing two artists together. They're both very well-known artists, but, not kind of like not in another constellation I would have necessarily pictured them together in this very creative book format.
Exactly.
And also each one of your publication seems so original, in its own right. I know that the audience have also looked at some of them. Are there any questions from our audience you would like to ask?
Hi, thank you for a beautiful presentation.
Thank you.
The Book Nomad exhibition, how did that come about? Was it through connections that you had with similar art spaces, then you collaborated together to build it?
Oh, yeah,
It's very
yes.
interesting.
I forgot to mention that this collection initiated actually in China through art book fair called ABC Art Book Fair. And during the pandemic, they couldn't organize big-scale art book fairs as they did before. So they think since people cannot travel to the book fairs, let's let the book travel. So they just started first from Beijing to send out a collection. At that time, I think 30 something books. And then it just passed on from one stop to another. And we had a very good relationship with ABC Art Book Fair. That's also the first art book fair we attend outside Bergen in 2017. we brought actually 4 Norwegian artists back to China and attended. We also brought the organizer of Bergen Art Fair back to China to take part in the 2nd edition of ABC Art Fair. So it's kind of long-term collaboration with them too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was also kind of curious about like the production aspects of your publications, because each one of them has quite specific and almost special treatment, right? They just look so expensive to produce. You know, I'm just thinking if they were to be produced, you know, in Europe or UK. Could you share a bit insight about that?
Yeah, we're very grateful that they're not that expensive to produce in China, or more specific in that factory in Nanjing, and also through our collaborator in Nanjing, Pan Yanrong, Mr. Pan Yanrong. He himself is a very renowned book designer, and actually Ile, the other designer and my partner, she visited the factory in Nanjing. It's totally the opposite of our imagination. We thought that old factory in China, printing factory, huge factory with many machines and many workers. Actually both the printing factory and the binding factory is all kind of like workshop-based factory, like family-owned workshop-based, and they treat printing and bookbinding with the same passion as us. Actually, they're eager to help the designer. Maybe due to their education or their knowledge, they couldn't design books, but they're eager to support designers to realize, to experiment together with the book designers. And it's very touching, and I think we would anyway work to keep the collaboration with them, to support each other. Yeah.
That sounds great. I might ask you for the contact.
Yes, I'll definitely share.
Yeah, what about future plans? You mentioned that your projects usually come about in a very organic way, but surely, you know, as a nonprofit art center, you would also look ahead, you know, in terms of your program or your strategy, or, you know, even simply like a list of artists you wish to collaborate. So how do you develop all those content?
Yeah, it's always a struggle, and actually we have a very ambitious plan, and we really would like to build Northing up because of the uniqueness and because the relevance in the society. We really would like to build it up to be the first East Asian art and culture center in Norway, yeah, actually that's also why we took contact with Easy in the first place. We'd like to learn, and we really admire your institution, that through the years you're like one of a kind in the whole Europe, and actually it's really encouraging and inspiring to see how Easy Contemporary built up an incredible institution here in Manchester.
Thanks to our dedicated audience, obviously, because it's also through the audience support, our community support, staff support. Yeah. And then I'm also curious, kind of like when those projects they take place in China, what are some of the most encouraging or surprising feedback you received from the audience?
Yeah, I mean for our books.
Yeah, like the exhibitions you organize, for example, at Banana Fish, like the retrospective, the archive exhibition.
Yeah, the audience, they are surprisingly open-minded, and they are actually eager to be connected to the world, to know what's going on in the other side of the earth, and also the younger generation. They're the future, so I think I always encourage them to try to come to Europe, to experience, to see by themselves. I see many young East Asian face, Chinese face here, so I think it's a very good decision to come out to have a look, to see the world. I think for those that don't have the possibility, so our activities are kind of a window in China for them to peek out. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for your insight. Any other questions from our audience?
Hi, thank you, Ben, for the all those fascinating book and design and the story behind it. And as you mentioned, like your positionality of the nonprofit organization is as the East Asian organization, bringing the East Asian culture. And maybe if we do a little comparison with the EC Contemporary here, I realize you are focusing on the media of the book publishing. Is there any like future plan? Maybe you will go beyond of the book publishing and doing something else. And also another question, if you don't mind me asking, since I was volunteering for art publishing in the art publishing, which is based in Shanghai, called 51 Persona, and they are struggling selling their art books in China now, especially after the half year of this year. After the mid-year, because some changing of the
We all know what
policy or something.
happened.
So I'm wondering if there are any influence or like negative impact for your organization to conduct the future collaboration in China. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, very good questions. Because I prepared this talk with focus on publications projects, so actually we have also many other kind of, as Xiaowen mentioned, exhibitions and cultural events, mostly in Bergen, but sometimes also in China. So we also try to organize events while we were touring, like attending book fairs. Like this time I was actually attending the small publisher fair in London. So so we are working both for that mission and the passion. The passion is in book design and publication, and the mission is to strive to promote East Asian too. Actually, not just promote one side of culture, but to promote the cultural exchange between the two cultures. And as you mentioned that many things happened this year, particularly this year in China. But the most direct impact is that we are not attending so many art book fairs anymore in China. But still, we will try to work differently, maybe less with book concerned projects, but more with other kind of contemporary art projects. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for sharing. I was wondering, because when we look at so-called artist book, it's always like stunning design. I like the style, and also like must be like spending a lot of time thinking about it, designing it. But it's very interesting. Like I also initiated and published artist book. But I kind of wonder why we always add artist book in front of books we published or we printed it with design. But for books published like really like big publisher, we just call it like books. So I always feel this kind of difference between them. So I wonder how you see it.
Yeah, because I think books as a media or as a format is undergoing a period of transformation because of the impact of digitalization and digital reading, and I think because historically books carry this burden. I call it a burden. This responsibility of carrying and disseminating knowledge and information. But that kind of burden is kind of relieved because of the fast development in digitalization. So I think, but it's kind of a liberation. So the book can carry on to be itself. Actually, then the most apt content will be able to be printed in the end to be a book. I think that's the direction that. That's also the reason behind all those art book fairs and all those creativity behind art books became all of a sudden so trendy in a way. And but I always parallel this development with the painting that happened like 100 years ago. I don't know exactly how long time ago when photography was introduced and became accessible, and many predicted that painting will disappear, but actually what happened is like all the painters that because painting is no longer carrying this burden of this recording lives, recording religious informations, and so then the it came this explosion in the experimental painting. So people tried to work differently to do what photographs cannot do. I think this is what's happening now with books. Yeah, so yeah, then now it's still called books and artist book, or they're all just books. But I think over time, book will be totally redefined or recreated in a way. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's my own theory as a book designer or book lover.
What you said about liberation and just being themselves.
Yeah, thank you.
Two more hands, one over there, one over here. Hello. Thank you for sharing. And can I ask something about funding? I was wondering, like, did you get enough funding, or where did you get it, or how did you get it?
I think it's a question that we all have everywhere we travel. That how, and because it's always a struggle. I think, as in many countries, maybe in Norway, the funding system is one of the best in the world, but still, I think we'll never get enough through the public funding. So we always need to work creatively and work a lot on try to fund our projects like through different means. So far we received from funding like many other organizations from the Art Council in Norway and from the municipality, but it's really hard to say that it's sufficient. Yeah.
So most of the funding is from Norway.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Currently, yes.
Yeah, thank you. I got another question. Like, I was curious about what inspired you to activate the whole plan, the whole like cultural exchange plan, because you mentioned you learned architecture before. I think it's totally different. Like, what changes your mind?
Yeah, it's a long story because I worked 12 years as an architect in Bergen, and how to. Yes, actually, it's I always say that it started actually out of some private reasons because in 2016, me and my wife, we got a daughter. So, and we think that what we are doing is kind of to prepare a better society for our daughter, who's going to be a Chinese growing up in a Norwegian society. So if the society is totally monocultural, or there's a lot of bias or misunderstanding or just ignorance in the society, she will, as many such second generation immigrants experienced, have this identity crisis. This is kind of a preempt measure through time to spend 10, 20 years to build up an institution in Norway to help to build up a kind of cultural understanding.
That's very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, my question's a little bit linked to that one. That's an amazing motivation for doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
So obviously, your institution in Bergen, it's grown a lot, and you do amazing projects all over the place. I was just wondering, what were the kind of practical first steps that you took back at the beginning of your project to kind of start turning your mission into reality?
Yes. Actually, it all started after my wife graduated as a visual designer from art school in Bergen, and she was actually selected that year. Her graduation project was selected to be the newcomer. Each year, the design festival in Bergen would choose two newly graduated design students as the newcomers, one from the visual communication, one from furniture design. She was the one from visual communication, so which also gave her I wouldn't say unhealthy, but not very realistic ambition. So she would like to start something for herself instead of looking for a job. And then we started to think what we should start. And we think, we should find a way to build a bridge between our original country, our original culture, and Norway. Yeah, there's also to help us to stay in the context, to stay relevant to our hometown or our home culture.
What was the very first thing that you did?
We made made a kind of zine, supplemental zine to a big art magazine. I say big, but actually at that time, art magazine was declining. So, Art World, 艺术世界. At that time, we made a snacks, which is the sub magazine to that magazine, and we invited Norwegian artists, mainly actually Ele's classmates, to contribute to that magazine. That's the very first project we made.
Awesome. It's interesting to know how you start with, obviously you don't have funding at that point, you've got to be very creative. That's really cool, thank you.
All right, so thank you so much for your questions. We've got beautiful books here to look at. I know that some of you might really would like to come closer and touch them and flip through the pages. I would want to do the same. And meanwhile, please join me to thank Ben for the wonderful presentation. And thank you for coming all the way to Manchester for the first time, but hopefully it won't be the only time. We hope to see you again very soon in the future.
I really enjoyed the city and enjoyed the hospitality of AZ, so I'll definitely come back. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and
Thank
hope
you.
you also stay a little while, maybe mingle a bit, enjoying some tea and coffee or biscuits, and I'll just chat with them. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you.